Hi, my name is Kevin Loftus. I'm from ACT, which is an abbreviation, ACT, Accelerating Change Together. And I'm going to present to you today the vision that we've developed for the Ballyforan area transition team for Ballyforan. In terms of an overall process, we're at the beginning of what will continue to be a design collaboration between now and the end of the year, where we'll be developing various different projects to different levels. And the first part of that, which is the end of a discovery period where we try to understand the context and have had various different discussions, is the visions. That's the outcome of the discovery phase, which I will be presenting today. At the end of the define phase, we will have a number of projects fleshed out to a feasibility level. So the number here proposed is 6. That's the original brief, but as we're looking through the possibilities, we may have less projects, but those projects developed in more detail. After the develop phase, we will have a design for a community centre for Ballyforan. So that'll be a key piece of infrastructure for the village going forward in its transition. And towards the end of the year, at the end of 23, we will have the final deliverables, which will be a report showing the process where we've come from and all of the information that we've developed to date. Currently, we're at the vision phase. So what you'll see now is a review of all of the different research we've done, culminating with the vision at the end of the presentation. So what we always do when beginning a project is to really try and understand the context. We step out, assume that we don't know anything about the area, so come in with our eyes wide open and try to ask various questions to get a better understanding of the place that we're working. So obviously Ballyforan is in the Midlands of Ireland, surrounded by a lot of peatland areas. It is connected through the national road network, but not on any of the main routes, though the route that it is on historically would have been one of the main roads. There's a rail network connecting Galway to Athlone and up towards Claremorris and on to Dublin, but it does not go through Ballyforan. We do have industrial light rail in the area. That's a result of the peat extraction industry locally. Ballyforan is on the Roscommon Galway border. It's also in the vicinity of different tourist infrastructure. So the River Suck Valleyway, the Galway to Athlone, which is part of the Galway to Dublin greenway connection. So missing that, but there's a connection through to Ballinasloe. Recently, the Athlone part has been extended with a new pedestrian bridge. So this is going to be an important piece of tourist and public green infrastructure in the area. Obviously, the Wild Atlantic Way on the west coast. The Hymany Way is a trail going from Portumna up through Roscommon, and we have the Green Heartland Cycleway. So within this mix, there's a lot of infrastructure around or just touching Ballyforan. A question of could we link some of that together to create tourist green infrastructure loops with the village at the centre. Looking where Ballyforan is in relation to other regional towns, we have Ballygar, which is a population of just over 1,000 people. Mount Bellew to the west, Ballinasloe to the south, Athlone, the biggest population centre of the area, with just over 20,000 people, and then Roscommon to the north with about 6,000 in population. The overall vicinity, or within the overall vicinity, you've just under 36,000 people. That's all living 25 minutes or less away by car from Ballyforan. It's in the Tagboy civil parish on the border with the Killiney barony and the Athlone barony. So they're historic baronies, and this would have been a very important crossing point. Ballyforan would have been a key strategic point, as people would have moved between the different baronies, but also across the river. We've seen the implementation of new rural infrastructure, but unfortunately Ballyforan has been excluded in this. There's good school infrastructure in the area. So what you see here in the green are the primary schools, and then in the purple, the secondary schools. So we do have a primary school in Ballyforan, and we do have a daycare centre in Ballyforan as well. Because of that proximity to the village, we have quite a good use of sustainable transport. So 2/3 of people either walking to school or taking the bus. When we look at work, it's not as green. So the majority of people are actually taking the car to work, about 2/3 there. That's no surprise when you look at the breakdown by industry. So a lot of people in the professional services, commerce and trade, other professions, public administration, a small number of people in agriculture, forestry and fishing, which may be surprising considering the rural nature of the village. It acts as a commuter village then, so people live in Ballyforan and they move out to work to the other urban centres, and even onto Galway. What we see is that 10% of people in 10% of households are without any car, which is quite a high number. And given that there's no public transport through the area, that's even more surprising. So there's a gap there. We are looking through our study at the potential to extend a trail from Ballyforan down towards the south. With the old existing railway there as well, potentially an opportunity exists to continue on to Ballinasloe by bike. So trying to tie in some green infrastructure in with the area. Also, more locally, we have the various villages that Ballyforan has in the surrounding area, and there was a potential plan there mooted, or a proposal in the development plan to connect those through cycleway infrastructure. The history of the village, we have three main houses: the Mucklawn House, Claremont House and the French House, which were key strategic families in the area, landlords that would have controlled the crossing. We also have the Cluna House towards the south, just out of the image here. But really these three houses would have benefited from that taxation point that was the bridge on the river, and that would have led to the overall development of the area. We also see the Gowla farm, which is just off to the left here, and that would have been an area for sugar beet manufacturing. The sugar beet industry being one that was important to the area, an industry that's actually left Ireland totally and thus had a negative impact in terms of employment or shifts to less diverse forms of agriculture. In terms of the overall map of the area, we can see there historically have been peatland areas, woodland areas, gardens linked to those larger houses. We had the orchard, the fair ground in the centre of our fair green in the centre of Ballyforan village itself. Obviously the river, and within that flood zone along that, so that's been annually flooding for many years. The river Suck then itself, a main tributary to the Shannon. It enters at Ballin, or just south of Ballinasloe, and as mentioned before, a main crossing point being this bridge, which is a 13-arch masonry viaduct, one of historic importance and obviously strategic crossing importance. To the north, then, we also have the wooden footbridge, not serving a large population or anything, but a piece of infrastructure nonetheless that can be utilised. We have the Ballyforan and District Angling Club, so the use of the river is quite strong. We also have the Inline Waterway Association Ireland, with the River Suck branch. So we see that there's activity along the river, and that's a potential asset to be utilised. As mentioned before, the area does flood annually, quite a bit, and as we go forward with increased rainfall, that will be more of a concern. We have a biodiversity action plan linked to the river, and we've looked at that and the actions from that, and they have informed the proposals that we're developing at the moment. Also along the river, we have areas of natural heritage, national heritage importance, even European heritage importance. So the River Callows SPA, that's a special protection area that looks at the different species of bird that come nest along the water to use the wetlands within the area. And then the National Heritage Area being the grasslands, the unique combination of different species that we have in the area. So two designations showing that this river and this river catchment area more generally is of national natural importance. Then we have a look at the peatlands, obviously very linked to the identity of the Midlands and Ballyforan. The Derryfada Bog, a huge 565 hectare area that obviously would have been used for peat extraction, and that would have been a key employer in the wider area. So Boardnamona being the main industry of the Midlands. So for a long time, peat extraction has existed in the area and has been a lifeline to a lot of families. But with environmental changes in practice in 2019, it was deemed that the extraction of peat had to stop. That obviously has an impact, and this was even taken up internationally, Ballyforan being one of the areas impacted by the loss of jobs, directly affecting the employment of the area. There's also underutilised industrial potential. There was a briquette factory proposed that was never delivered. So a lot of things pointing to potentials for the area that the area in the end never benefited from. Boardnamona now is taking a very different direction. It's focused on helping Ireland transition. They have a vision for a climate neutral Ireland by 2050. So the company is moving from one that was about producing energy from materials that would have released fossil fuels and carbon to a company that is protecting habitat, helping to sequester carbon and producing energy in a renewable way. Linked to that is the Derry Fodder Bog Rehabilitation Plan. What might all of this bring? So this idea of rehabilitation of the wetlands is obviously beneficial to nature, but it can also benefit communities as well. So bogs can become places for education. They can become recreational areas. They can also be used, if deemed appropriate, as places to produce energy. We've already mentioned renewables, so that can be the form of wind, but also we do see solar projects occurring on rehabilitated wetlands. Looking at the town more specifically, the heritage, or the village, sorry, more specifically, we've looked at the heritage of the area, how it is currently. So a lot of buildings now being left vacant. Just some images of the old and new schoolhouse and St. Joseph's Church. We have Claremont House, of course, one of the key focuses of our project. And looking from 2005 to 2000 and between 2000 and, from 1995 to 1999 slash 2003, we can see that there's not a whole lot of development. So the town or the village stays pretty much as it is. Then we move to 2013 and we can see that there's a substantial change in the growth of the area. So towards the end of the economic boom, most likely we saw a lot of development in Ballyforan. In terms of statistics, a lot of working age people living in the area making up the majority, nearly 60%. Also with quite a lot of young people, just over 30%. The elder population then 10%. So the village has grown substantially in a very short space of time. We can see in the last 11 years, the population increased by 25%, while in the rest of Ireland, the increase was 11%. And to put that into context, I suppose Ireland for a long time has seen its population decrease. So even the fact that we've seen an 11% increase in Ireland is substantial in itself. A 25% in Ballyforan is remarkable. Looking at the village, we've tried to understand the various facilities that exist, the possible tourist attractions and local amenities, also enterprises and business, the ones greyed out being not in use anymore. But we can see that Ballyforan needs more places to work, to meet, to play, to build, to grow. We have the existing community hall, which isn't in constant use, but that is linked to the Hopes and Dreams creche. We have Ballyforan National School. That national school having received a green flag, which shows an awareness and a willingness to participate in sustainable actions. We have the Ballyforan Fair, which is, of course, a huge annual event in the village, one that brings people from far and wide, and is a great example of a traditional country fair. St. Aidan's GAA Club, again linked to sustainable action through the green clubs. There we also have a co-working facility. We have Dysart Football Club. So this is showing, I suppose, that it's not just Ballyforan village itself, it's also the wider hinterland, and not just Dysart, it's 4 roads as well. What we see is that within the different villages we have different clubs where the communities come together more as a sort of parish organisation than distinct villages. Architectural conservation, St. Joseph's Church. We have the water pump. We have Ballyforan Bridge, as mentioned previously, and the footbridge. So all of these are noted on the Irish buildings of historic importance records. Looking at the old structure of the town, we can see where the main road is. That's the same as was or is today. We have the old settlement grid. So this is showing quite a classical way of laying out a village or a town. So you would start with a grid, and that means that everything is connected, that you try to avoid dead ends, or where you have dead ends, they would be designed in such a way that they could be extended. So you have this idea of possibly extending a grid. So that's the old traditional way of laying out towns, and it means that everything is networked so that you don't get congestion. What we have today currently is the main road. We also have those converging roads, and the sort of key settlement road. We have the 4 housing estates, and within those we have dead ends. So that's something. We also have dead end streets. So this is something that's common in all Irish housing estates, basically from about 40 years on. We haven't planned integrated networks of transport, and what that means is that we get congestion on roads because everything is coming to one point. So although this is something that's very common, it's something we would like to try and avoid. There were plans for housing estates that weren't realised. So had they been realised, we would have seen a further increase in the population of over 100 people, potentially. And again, more networks that either turn in on themselves or end up in dead ends. We've looked at the housing stock of the village, and we estimate the majority, as per also the Roscommon data, would be of C rating in terms of energy efficiency. So that puts it mid-table. Absolutely not the worst, but far from the best. And it also means that locally people are spending a lot of money on energy for heating homes. In terms of the fuel that people are using, the vast majority, in terms of the fuel people are using, the majority of it is oil, with a large portion of peat burning as well, those taking up the vast majority of the overall energy. If we have an average family house, typically they're spending around €860 on electricity and €1,170 on heating. As well as that, just over €15 a week on petrol. So the average family spends just under €3,000 annually on energy. that also creates emissions of total around 12 tons of CO2 annually. So if we take the average family and we multiply it by the amount of households in Ballyforan, we see that the village is spending around 210,000 euro a year on energy and emitting nearly 900 tons of CO2. A wind turbine of about 2.5 to 3 megawatts produces 6 million kilowatt hours yearly. So that would power the whole of Ballyforan 4 times and then some. Alternatively, if you wanted to power Ballyforan, a 3.5 hectare solar farm would also cover that energy demand. We've been given a number of projects to look at. First of all, the connection from the village to the proposed greenway, that new bog loop that will surround the section of the Derry Fada bog. We've also to look at the library and courthouse project, the Claremont House and Grounds, the village landscaping plan, and the old Garda station, which is currently up for sale. So that may be a project that sort of takes care of itself. Lastly, the heritage trail linking from the wooden bridge on the top down to the Derry Cahill Bridge, with all of the different historic sites along the way. Other potential projects that aren't covered in the scope of the project look at different amenities that could be of benefit to the community, and there are some things we also touch on in the overall vision. Then in terms of the development plan, we look at the Roscommon objectives on a county scale, and we won't go into these specifically, but we're conscious of all of the planning development work and objectives for the area, and specifically then for Ballyforan, the 4 key objectives. Areas of desired impact. So this has come from the community brief. It's about creating employment, creating new enterprises and strengthening the position of existing ones, creating new economic activities, skills development, building skills and knowledge in the community to enable it to address issues it thinks are important, retention of the working age population, decarbonisation, and understanding the environmental impact and limiting that. The funds that our project is coming from, and one that Ballyforan hopefully will benefit from more widely, is the Just Transition Fund. The just transition is the term used to describe the transition to a climate neutral economy while securing the future of livelihoods of workers and their communities. What does a climate neutral future look like? So when we're talking about all of these funds, it's important to understand what are the key objectives we're trying to get to and what might unlock more funding in the future. So it's about renewable energy dominance, electrification of transport with the prevalence of public modes, energy efficiency and conservation, rewilding and carbon sink conservation, regenerative or sustainable agriculture. It's about local production, circular and sharing economies, technological innovations, climate resilience, and public awareness and education. Looking at the projects that have received Just Transition funding, we can roughly categorize them into 4 key areas. So co-working hubs, training centres, obviously about reskilling and creating new employment opportunities. We've biodiversity actions, we've peatland treatment, and we have renewable energy projects. So how do we unlock potential funding for the future? What we're trying to do in the vision is to show how we respond to all of these different opportunities when looking at the just transition. So understanding Ballyforan, the context, its strengths, opportunities, its challenges, and using all of that to try and link in with this move towards a sustainable future, and with that in mind, create a vision that ties all of those different elements together. To begin with, in our discovery phase, we tried some blue sky thinking, which was taking where we are now and imagining in good or in bad cases what might happen in the future. So what if Ballyforan, as well as a commuter village, also became a destination? What if Ballyforan became the centre of a local transport network? What if Ballyforan became part of a Midlands cycle network? What if Ballyforan was a nature escape for the neighbouring towns, a nature restoration showcase for students, a heritage destination for tourists? What if walking and cycling were prioritised? What if traffic calming was introduced? What if old stories were retold? What if new and old landscapes could improve climate resilience and provide places for people? What if bogs became the place for new traditions? What if the flooding issue became a real threat, but a natural buffer, was a solution that could also reduce runoff from agricultural lands and improve biodiversity? What if the orchard was revitalised and opened to the community and became a hub for community employment? What if the old landlord's gardens became a community garden and produced local Ballyforan food? What if the grounds had walking trails and dedicated places for children to play? What if the fairground became a public park, or was rewilded, or continued as an event space, or perhaps a combination of all? What if vacancy was an opportunity for employment and free energy could encourage businesses into the area? What if by retrofitting at a community scale, we could reduce the overall costs and improve the speed of the transition? What if Ballyforan became energy independent and exported surplus energy, making a profit for the community? What if Ballyforan continued to grow in an unplanned manner, lacking connection and creating more car dependency? Or what if we re-established its historic grid, providing a solution for growth in a way that allows connection and to do so sustainably? What if Ballyforan became Ireland's first carbon negative community? All of this looks at the past, remembering where the village has come from, and also looks at showcasing the future, where the village may go. And that's where Ballyforan could be a model for other rural communities to regenerate, looking at its past, understanding its key assets, and using that as leverage to create opportunities for the future, to showcase what a future might be. From that discovery, we've come on key objectives, and these were agreed with the Ballyforan area transition team. Discovery objectives being that we create space for new economic activities, space for skills development, to facilitate remote working, to support the retention of the working population, to implement climate resilience, to reduce the overall environmental impact, to create a showcase for decarbonisation, to look at and understand how we can tap the potential for community renewable energy, the potential for improved building performance, to create places for people and nature, to maximise the connection to the river and facilitate active travel, to encourage public transport in the area, to have Ballyforan itself as an educational experience that also creates attractions for tourists and revives heritage, to plan sustainable growth, create places for families and places for communities, to enhance biodiversity and to encourage active sports in the area. Now I'll take you through the key constraints and opportunities, and from those start to layer new potentials for what Ballyforan's future might be. So we have the River Suck. Linked to that, we have the peatlands and the outline of the village itself, the road network that ties the different areas in the surroundings together, the farmlands, the bridges, the existing woodlands and buildings, the old industrial rail network, the area of special protection, the SPA, and the natural heritage area. We have the proposed wind farm to the northeast, the old industrial channels, and we have heritage sites along the way, so various ring forts, the old RUC office, the different historic houses, and of course the bridges. We also have historic landscapes, so the orchard, the gardens linked to the houses, the fair green as heritage landscapes. We have the areas that are liable to flood, so that flood on an annual basis and are set to flood more regularly and with greater impact as we become a wetter climate. So what if we build on this and try to improve resilience in the area? We see that restoration of the peatland is already being planned, or in some cases in play. We have the potential to also protect the river itself. So imagine along the river we have a protective buffer, a riparian buffer that helps to limit runoff into the river. On the other edge of those protected natural heritage areas, we could have a second natural buffer. So again, a zone of nature where we limit the impact of runoff into those zones. And that would create within those zones a sort of flooding and nature buffer, which can still operate as productive agricultural land, but also adds a nature benefit and a flooding mitigation benefit. In future, zones along this may even increase as part of wetland areas with funding to support that transition. We have the first greenway bog loop, so that's the bog loop number, or loop number 1. Also between the bridges to the north, the Ballyforan Bridge and the walking bridge, the potential to have a loop around those. We have the Heritage Trail, which was mentioned previously as one of the projects, hitting some of those key sites on the way down to the Derryfather or Derrycahill Bridge. Then we have our third potential loop, looking at that large peatland area. So this one could be focused on the history of peat extraction. And lastly, looping the far bank, bringing it back to Ballyforan to create a nature loop along the river. Within this zone, we have farming with nature, so still productive use of the lands, but also with an awareness of the natural history that exists, the potential for community wind, for industrial heritage to be showcased as a recreational space, to have habitat research, so bringing visitors and potentially even employment into the area through habitat restoration, and with that the increase of native species that are in need of support, having educational points along these trails, and linking back to the idea of energy, the potential for community solar. Finally, even having bird watching in the area, so this becomes an attractor for people who wouldn't typically come to Ballyforan to see this combination of natural heritage and human use, human education as well. Then at a village scale, we zoom in. We had our 6 key projects, the fourth one here, not numbered, being the Heritage Trail. We have the historic layout of the town, and one of the things we're proposing is to extend that idea of the riparian buffer, going back to the old heritage layout of Ballyforan, the woodlands that would have created or existed in the areas. So inviting that nature back into town. Then along the main Ballygar to Athlone connection, the R363, and up towards Four Roads. We have connections along all of those roadways, but what we can see here is that they're quite fragmented. They're not tying together, so it's pieces of infrastructure that don't align. The potential of a river walk, so one of the projects that we're looking at developing, may give us the opportunity to try and connect all of this network together. And with that, if this is just uploading, making a new connection from Claremont through to the Fairgreen area. So prioritizing walking and cycling, also improving the potential for safe crossing points in the village. And linked to that is the idea of slowing traffic, so having traffic calming measures that would limit speed within the main zone of the regional road. Improving the overall streetscape, also giving over space for public amenities. And then proposing a bus stop. So if this is a key infrastructure piece, if this becomes a new focus in the area, that we have public infrastructure linked to that. Finally, where we do have parking, also having the capacity to generate energy in that area, so a solar parking canopy. Looking towards the centre of the village, then we're proposing the historic trees that were previously mapped be reinstated and potentially continued along the Fairgreen. So we get the definition of a historic green space. This operating, of course, as a field, as is currently. Also the potential to operate as a market or for a concert, or as a combination of all of these things, which is in effect the Ballyforan Fair model. Linking to other potentials, can we see how to unlock vacant buildings, especially ones that are in key prominent positions, to make the village more attractive. Looking at the library, of course, is one of those key projects. Then zooming back out again for a second, looking at the network of paths that existed in the old layout around Claremont. Of course, there's an area that's linked to the community and what the community can intervene in, but we're also trying to understand the potential of the wider fields. So zooming in to that Claremont grounds area, looking at proposing a picnic area, a zone which is an orchard and a community garden, combining those together. The potential to have a biodigester or an anaerobic digester, so something that can take waste, organic matter from the community, excuse me, but also from farmers and from the garden. So this would produce sustainable energy within the area, also act as a showcase for sustainable energy. To have a new community centre as a key strategic facility for the community, places for recreation, so sports areas, the potential for glamping, attracting visitors into the area who would come to see the natural heritage, and also stay contributing to the local economy. And lastly, places for children to play. If we could connect then from the gardens out to the wider grounds areas, the historic grounds, of course, these areas act as agricultural lands. So the proposal isn't to change that, but to in some way allow a combination where through fenced off pathways, people can move through the fields or along the verges, edges of hedgerows, but in a way getting the benefit of the larger grounds, and those fields then, of course, being in the control of the farmers who can open and close or limit access as required. So in doing this, we could see the diversity of farming activity that happens in the area, also potentially in the future, maybe even seeing the return of beet production. If we have this wider network, we also could look at the opportunity of using that as part of an amenity space in itself. Then connecting back down to the river, which of course is one of the main assets of Ballyforan. We see this potential for an activated waterfront where the slipway already exists. So extending the bridge to add walking and cycling infrastructure, to have a fishing point, to have boat storage, to have a swimming point. So all of these activities coming together to create an activated space within the town. Lastly, looking at some of the residential quality. So taking what is ubiquitous green space, again, something that we see in all Irish housing estates, and trying to understand how we can better use that as a facility for the community. And if we were to come together as a community, so linking what are repeated typologies. So the house of one estate is a model of its neighbour. So that means that retrofitting can happen on a larger scale and quicker because there's the benefit of repetition. And then very lastly, looking at how the town might grow or the village might grow into the future. So we've seen that Ballyforan within a very short space of time grew substantially, linked to the increase of Ireland's population, 10% in the last 10 years, and linked to that, projections that Ireland is going to be the second fastest growing country in the EU between 2017 and 2050. and even now more recent reports show that the numbers projected here are probably underestimated. To use a reference, this is Sagrada Familia, which is a cathedral that was constructed or is being constructed in Barcelona. So the construction started in 1880, and this picture was taken in the early 1920s. So 40 years since the project initially begun. And what's important to note here is that at this moment, the city is only starting to encroach on the site. We can see that it's still being used as an agricultural area. And what this shows is that the people who conceived of this building planned ahead to such an extent that they knew the city was going to grow and it was going to need this facility in the future. So this is what's called cathedral thinking, where you lay the foundation of something you or maybe even the second generation may never get the benefit of, but it's the generations after to come who will get the key benefit of those decisions. And this is something that is very often missing in planning, but crucial if we're to give over a good legacy to the future. This is Sagrada Familia today, and it's still not complete. It's meant to be complete in the next 2 years, but what we can see is that the city has since grown around the cathedral, and now this cathedral supports the wider Barcelona area. So looking back at that idea of a historic grid, this was the initial plan that was put in place for Ballyforan, and that anticipated this idea of growth, this historic way of laying out a town. So could we learn from that again? Could we imagine to extend that historic grid, not literally, but as a framework that would develop over time? So as projects would come, the potential for development would happen. That grid plan would be used to facilitate the growth. So we would have primary and then secondary connections. So what the village might look like in 25 years, or in 100 years, or even 200 years into the future. By laying out an overall strategy for that growth, we can ensure that you get attractive neighbourhoods, public space that's connected and walkable and is friendly for cyclers, for tourists, for visitors, and for the residents. That's the end of the overall vision. I hope you found it useful, and we're looking forward to your feedback. Thank you.